Hi, I am Amanda Cassar, and welcome to the Financial Secrets Revealed podcast, where I have collected the wisdom from some amazing people around the world to understand better their money story. I have financial advisors, multi-million-dollar corporate executives, and those surviving on Centrelink, even running global charities. I hope you enjoy listening to the episodes as I speak with these incredible people about their stories. Hello and welcome to the Financial Secrets Revealed podcast season 2. Today I am joined by the lovely Caroline Bartlett. We were just trying to work out how many years we've known each other, Caroline, and I think you were a business development manager with a group called Cassar when we first met.
Yes,
So I
that's
think at
right.
least 10 years or something.
Oh, more than 10 years, Amanda, for sure. Maybe
Just
15, but
wow,
don't
we
give
go
away
so
our
far.
age.
Well, I've been an advisor for 21 years now, so that would make sense, I guess. So
This is true. This is true.
now, over a champagne at some stage, we got to talking about your history and your family and your lovely son and where everything's at now that you're a swinging single again.
hmm
And you led on to me that you were in a financially abusive relationship yourself. So
hmm
you're a savvy woman who's obviously been around financial services for many, many years. So, can you tell us how that came about for you, Caroline?
Well, Amanda, they do say smart women, foolish choices. Sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees or the trees for the wood. So, oh, gosh, to put it in to frame it for you. I had grown up in a very traditional, stable family. My parents actually would have been married this year. They're coming up to their 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow,
So,
congratulations.
yeah, it's a long time to be married. So I actually married quite young in life. I met my first husband when I was 15, turning 16. And our relationship was a good relationship, but at age 27, it kind of came to an end naturally. It was an amicable split. We had really just grown up and realized that we had met each other at such a young age and we needed to. We both had different ideas about what the future would hold. And I was single for about 10 months. I was working at the time in the bank as a lending officer, and one day this very charming man walked into the bank and applied for some different banking services. And I probably met with him 3 times. And he started to send me some lovely cards and show an interest in me in a romantic sense. Alongside this, I was going through my property settlement with my teenage sweetheart who I'd married, and through a divorce. So there was a lot going on. I was 27, so I wasn't very old, not too experienced in life, just starting my career. I'd moved from, bank cashier to lending officer, and then I was second in charge of the branch. So this man walked into the branch one day and he was extremely handsome and very charming. And it was really the first time I'd been single. As I said, I met my husband when I was 15. I hadn't really dated before, so I lacked a lot of experience. And this handsome man came in and he had a lot of the same interests that I had. And over time, we developed a relationship. I had a wedding to go to, of all things, and I actually invited him along as my plus one. And that kind of began our relationship. So, uh, to answer your question, that's how I met my financial, let's say, abuser or person that took advantage of me. He at the time was going through a divorce, and I resonated with him. We had a lot of the same issues. Um, yes, so that's how I met him.
Yeah, so lots in
Uh,
common there right at the start. It's funny, nobody says, this rat bag walked in and, right off the bat, it's always this charm and charisma and this beautiful person.
yeah, handsome
Yeah.
man. In fact, I can remember the day when he walked into the bank branch, and it was almost like the room span. He was so good looking, and there was this aura about him, and we had this really strong connection. So that was in the September, roughly, approximately. And what happened was, in the December, I arrived home from work, and I found him on my doorstep. Now, I was living in the family home, and it was my intention to hopefully buy the family home that I had built with my first husband on acreage on the north side of Brisbane. And I arrived home, and here he was with a whole load of suitcases at the front door. And he said, "Look, I've had a fallout with my father." He had been living with his father, and we'd had no formal discussion about moving in. We'd met in the September, so it's September, October, November, December. Here he was on my
3
doorstep,
months later,
three
wow.
months later, exactly. And he basically moved in. And as I said, love is blind. There was a lot of chemistry. I was young. We had lots in common. Now, at the time, I had my younger sister sharing the house with me, the family home. It was quite a big home, and a dear girlfriend of mine. And it would have been January, February approximately. The first signs of manipulation probably occurred. So he actually asked me to ask them to leave, that it would be better for our privacy that we lived alone. And that should have been my first red flag, that so soon that he wanted us to move into this relationship alone on acreage in my home. So after a little bit of soul searching, I did ask my dear friend to leave, and she was very upset. And my sister said, "Look, I'm actually going to go with her." So that left me alone with him in the house, and really that's what he wanted. He said he wanted privacy for our relationship, and didn't he felt that those people were taking advantage of me. In
But he wasn't.
hindsight,
Excellent.
yeah, exactly, he wasn't, but those people were taking advantage of me. So that was January, February approximately. And by February, my divorce was finalised, and it was coming toward the end of my property settlement with my ex husband. And we discussed me buying the family home. Now, when my partner came into my life, he did not bring any assets with him at that time. I don't
Oh,
want to
he
go
had his
into too much of his
suitcases,
personal
Caroline, come
detail. He
on.
had his suitcase, exactly. But he suggested that we buy the house together. And I was a little apprehensive. So what I decided to do was make him a third party lender or borrower, sorry, on my mortgage. So he became a third party borrower. So he had a mortgage against my home, but the home was in my name. And I felt that that gave me a little bit of control. In hindsight, no, it didn't, because we went on to sell that house and buy another house, which became 50-50 in ownership. So, you know, once everybody had left and it was us alone and the house had settled, some of the cracks started to appear. He had instability in the workforce. There always seemed to be some person that he didn't get along with, or some reason why he couldn't maintain his employment. Now, I'd always been a very responsible person who saved and met their debts and obligations. It quickly became a theme throughout our relationship that he would take jobs and only stay in the job 3 to 6 months, and then there would be a problem with the job and he would move on. And of course, there would always be a gap in employment, which you know uh, provided for me to suffer financial pressure. By the April, I'd actually fallen pregnant with our child, and I found myself pregnant and at that time, unfortunately, a domestically abusive relationship, verbally abusive more than anything. So my self-esteem eroded, and whilst I was successful in the workforce and being promoted, at home I was being demoted. I wasn't being supported, and my confidence was being eroded on a daily basis.
So this was very, very quick succession that,
Very
we're
quick
talking months
succession,
here by the time he'd
months.
turned up, moved in, kicked out your friends, isolated you, got you knocked up and brought nothing.
Exactly, exactly,
Wow.
Amanda. In
Wow.
hindsight, you can see, and I don't even know that he really knew what he was doing. I know that he wanted to be in a relationship with me, and look, there was true love, there was
Yeah.
love,
I
but
don't
unfortunately, that mixes um the waters, muddies the waters,
yeah.
because you can be in love and it can be truly dysfunctional.
Mm.
So I saved like mad. When I found out I was pregnant in the April, I had intended to take 6 months maternity leave. And I had saved and put our mortgage in advance. And I think that the biggest kick to me was the day of our child's birth, that he actually arrived at the hospital and told me that he had resigned from his employment, that he was not coping well with the thought of becoming a parent, and that the job wasn't for him. So I felt immediate financial distress, that how was I going to have this maternity leave? So it was kind of robbed from me, and it was a very short-lived maternity leave. I think I ended up taking about 16 weeks. I had intended to take up to 6 months, but I felt so responsible for our mortgage. And the other thing that had started to happen was he had started to buy and sell motor vehicles. Now, he had a very big um, image to uphold, and every 6 months, I want to say, a new motor vehicle came on the scene. And what happened was we went from owning to hire purchase over a very short period. And, working in banking, I felt so responsible to meet these commitments that I went back to work. I was so determined, however, to have a bond with my child that I continued to breastfeed for nearly 18 months. Uh, he actually did not return to work for some time. My parents had been on a vacation overseas, and when my mother and father returned, he actually returned to work, and my son went into the care of my mum on a daily basis. So that was a little bit of a rescue from my parents to say, look,
Oh, it's
get
so
back to
lovely to have
work.
family support, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah, my parents were very good with my bubbies too, and my in-laws.
exactly.
Yeah, they were great.
Exactly. And without them, I don't know where I would have been. It kind of was the catalyst to him returning to work. As I said, we had a lot of hire purchase, and the debts just seemed to get greater and greater. I remember
Were
one.
these in his name or your name, Caroline?
Well,
How was it
actually, they
structured?
were in both names. And I remember sitting in my office one day at work, and I was second in charge of a bank, and I got a phone call from him. And he said, I'm at XYZ, high purchase, and I need you to come and sign some forms. I've bought this new, and I think in memory it was a Subaru RS Sports. And I said, I really don't want to do this. But I felt so obliged to make his dreams come true and to make him happy and to keep him calm, that I found myself at the hire purchase place signing the paperwork. And as I said, the relationship had become verbally abusive, and there were times where he could rage at me for hours at a time. So to avoid that, I did many, many things to appease him, including going into financial contracts to provide for him what he wanted.
It's interesting hearing the words you use. I've interviewed quite a few people now in this space, and the idea of I wanted to support his dreams. It
Mhm.
seems to be a recurring theme. Another lady told me, he sold me the dream of, this boat that we were going to have and sail around the world together,
Yes.
and, hadn't counted the cost basically of, it was started at $30,000, and I think she ended up 1.2 million in the hole, like by the time this dream had become a nightmare. So yeah, because you don't sit down and go, right, what's the final outcome, which, you work in banking, you look back and think, should have stuck to my guns, or should have this, or should have that. We should all over
You
ourselves.
should have, could have.
Should have, would have, could have.
I'm a bit of a pacifist. I just wanted peace in my household.
Especially when you've
I
got a
had a
little
small
baby,
child.
it's
Exactly.
really important.
And I was working full time. I was the primary breadwinner, and Amanda, that really caused angst in the relationship. Um, the more and more I earn, and the more and more I felt very vulnerable, so I decided to study and increase my earning capacity. And the more success I had, the worse I made him feel. So the worse he treated me. And
So
it
he
was a very
viewed
vicious cycle.
your success as emasculating for him, which I suppose now looking
Absolutely.
back is another massive red flag.
Absolutely. And whilst he enjoyed, the money and me being successful, it didn't sit well with his ego. Now, I will tell you, I told nobody. I told nobody that I was being abused verbally, domestically, financially. I felt very alone. I felt extremely embarrassed because, here I was. I was, at that time, a qualified financial advisor. I'd done all of my training. I was working in the bank. I was making good money. To the outside world, I had a lovely home on acreage. How could I turn around and say to somebody, "Hey, I'm making dumb decisions and I'm not being treated well." How could I do that? So,
Wow.
unfortunately, when my son was around 3 years of age, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my head and I was quite ill. And I was scared that I wasn't going to make it. I actually had to have a 13-hour operation, and it was a very dangerous operation. What happened was, the out-of-pocket expenses, even though I had private health insurance, was around $7,000. I was able to muster about $3,000, and the shortfall was about $4,000, which my parents met. When I realized I wasn't going to get the support from this man, who I love dearly, was when I was in intensive care after this 13-hour operation, and he chose not to come and visit me. He said to me that he needed to keep our child's normality, um, day-to-day activities unchanged. So he chose to not come and visit me. He later revealed that he couldn't cope well with my illness, and he certainly didn't want to see me in intensive care. So at that moment, I realized, you know what, I can't rely on this person to support me. I suffered a facial palsy, which really altered my appearance. I was so frightened to take time off work because of, again, wanting to be such a good, loyal person and provide financially and meet my financial commitments. I was back at work within 4 weeks with facial palsy. And I actually went nearly 2 years with a facial deformity before I took the time off to have it fixed,
Caroline.
um, because I didn't trust that I could rely on this person financially. So, financial abuse, I know it sounds like a harsh word, but it was lack of financial support, it was lack of emotional support, it was lack of understanding of what a woman goes through, particularly with, her face and her appearance and so on.
I've found that it's quite rare that financial abuse is a standalone event. It usually is so interwrapped with, like you said, the emotional, the
Yes,
wearing down of a woman. You've got, and on outside looking in, you've got a beautiful family, a lovely son, a successful career. Your health
absolutely.
had been impacted, obviously, but you're back at it. So, it's rainbows and unicorns for everybody looking in at you, You're
Yes,
technically a financially savvy, well-educated woman.
yes.
So I want to make it so clear that, financial abuse and any form of abuse really, there's no boundaries, there's no barriers,
Nope.
there's no,
Can happen to anybody.
yeah,
And what happens is it starts off very slowly, Amanda, and what as you lose more and more self-esteem and spiral down, it's very hard to extract yourself from that, especially when the person, and look, it wasn't all bad. He was an extremely devoted father, very loving and doting. We would have lovely times together. Unfortunately, due to I think his childhood, I can't be sure. This emotional abuse occurred in our relationship. Um, but it wasn't
yeah,
24/7. It would come out of nowhere. So you would recover from these
bouts.
bouts of
Yep.
emotional, exactly, and then
And there's always that hope, isn't there, that
almost trust.
that'll be the last. Things will get better.
Absolutely,
It's got to be,
things
I want that
things will
person
get
back.
better. Exactly. We actually spent 12 years together, and that sounds like an awfully long time, 12 years. And I think the head tumor and me having to regroup from that and, find my way with healing and um, finances probably slowed our breakup, and wanting my child to feel secure. During this time, I want to say he had many, many, many roles, many different jobs. Never had problem getting a job, but keeping a job where he felt happy was almost impossible. So I can't even tell you the amount of jobs that came and went, the amount of purchases that came and went, the amount of hire purchases, and the pressure that
So was
you
your
know
debt building and building and building over time, or he would
absolutely.
be paying it down and help? How was the debt situation going?
The debt was building, however, my career had really blossomed and I was earning very, very good money. So the more money I made, the more ability we had to have these luxury items and a new home and it seemed to be that, for example, I think it was his 40th birthday. I purchased a Harley Davidson for him, and it was close to $40,000. Now, had I been in my right headspace, and I know I borrowed some money, I can't remember how much, it probably, red flag, you're trying to please this man, you're trying to meet his dream of being this Harley Davidson rider. Um, you know, Smart woman, foolish choices.
So
So
you've said for
that's all I
12
can say.
years you're supporting, you're trying to build this beautiful family, give your beautiful little son some stability. He was
Yep,
a good dad. I mean, you're very
yes,
generous with all the praise for, what was there.
yes. He was a very good father, and unfortunately, my son did witness domestic violence, and the form of verbal abuse. And this was the trigger for me ending the relationship. My son might have been 10. Now, prior to that, when children are young, they go to bed early, or they're not necessarily aware of what's going on. I could see that my son was becoming more and more aware of what was going on in our relationship. And I said to myself, this cannot continue. This branch, this family tree that contained domestic abuse, from the family line on my son's side had to end. And it was a sad day when we broke up. We actually hugged each other and cried. That I had begged him to go for therapy, psychotherapy, psychiatrist, psychologist.
They say for women, there's often you're out of the relationship emotionally long before you actually verbalize that this is it, I'm done. I mean, you've said back when you had your surgery, you knew from that moment he couldn't be relied on, and still years later you're there. So was there a final straw that broke the camel's back? Was there a moment in time where you went, I am done?
I think it was my child's puberty years. I think I saw my child turning into a young man, and it frightened me to death that he would do the same thing to his partner. and that I was
He would think
modeling,
normal.
yeah, I was modeling really poor behavior. And I will add now that my son is in a beautiful relationship with his girlfriend. And when I first met his girlfriend, they'd been living together for maybe 6 months. They were in Melbourne, so COVID kind of, mixed things up a little bit and we couldn't meet each other. And she said to me, "You have raised such a lovely boy. He never raises his voice to me. He's never cruel to me. He's never derogatory to me. He always builds me up."
Oh, wow.
So
Little heart
that
beat a
really
bit faster then.
I know. So that really reinforced to me at that time that the decision to break away from his father when he was 10, turning 11, even though it broke my son's heart, it really did. He actually cried. He said, "Mum, I don't want this to happen. I knew this day would come, but I don't want it to happen." So as a family, we were clinging together, but it was so much dysfunction financially, emotionally, and so on.
So undoing the finances, and you've said you're building up massive amounts of debt. The financial settlement must have been uh, an aha moment or an oh shit moment, whichever way. How did that all unfold when you built up so much debt?
Well, Amanda, life throws you curveballs, you know. The house had to be sold. We'd bought a house together and it was in both names. And about oof, 6 weeks after we separated, I was living in the family home. I was involved in a very bad accident, a bus crash.
I
And
mean, that made
I had to
headlines,
be
that bus crash.
it did make headlines. It did make headlines. And I was being cared for by my parents in their home. And at the time, he had moved out and he'd moved into a rental property. He actually took real estate agents through the home while I was at my parents' and had appraisals done. And I was shocked by that because, I was occupying the family home. We had agreed on 50-50 custody. I had been aware that trying to deal with him and on a financial basis and custody basis, it was going to be the the route of less resistance if I agreed to the 50-50 custody. My son and his father were extremely close to each other, and I trusted that he would do the best thing for us. So I remember the day I was in my parents' house and I was laying in bed and I was bruised and battered and I was needing surgery on my leg and so on. And he came in and he said to me, "I want the house sold and I want it sold now. I've had an appraisal and I've had a low appraisal and I've had a higher appraisal, but I want it sold quickly because I want my money." And I actually said to him at the time, "Please don't do this. We really need to capitalize as much as we can from this property." Um, and he said, "Well, no, I don't want to wait." So me being fair, I said to him, "Look, your low appraisal is here, your high appraisal is there. How about I pay you in the middle?" My father actually loaned me the money to pay him out. And once I had my surgery and returned to my home, I actually marketed the property, and I think it was around 11 weeks of marketing, and it came at a cost, but I achieved about $50,000 more than his top appraisal. And he actually came back to me and said, "Well, lucky you believe in karma." And it was the first time I stood up to him, and I actually did not pay him the extra money. I'd been smart enough to engage a lawyer and, sign a property settlement based on the figure that he agreed upon. And years later, it came out that we were talking about something else. And he said to me, "You know what? I would never trust you financially again. You ripped me off." And I said, "What? I ripped you off? How on earth did I rip you off?" And he felt that he was kind of entitled to that. But it was my small, I won't say victory, but digging my heels in and saying, "Well, no, you actually chose to put pressure on me. I had to borrow the money from my parents. So that was your decision and I'm not responsible for that." But moving forward, we did have to co-parent, like all relationships. I chose to send my son to a private school, and that was the next battle because we had 50-50 custody arrangement. There was never a formal custody arrangement, and there was never a financial arrangement. Um, I really wanted my child to go to a private school, a smaller school than our local public school, because my son, he was a little shy, and I felt that he would be, overlooked at the public school. Um, my son's father decided, nope, wasn't paying for private school, so that responsibility fell on my shoulders. And it actually, control continued, because it even came down to when it came to pay for books and uniforms, he would agree to pay for 50% of the books and 50% of the sports uniform, because a private school has a private uniform, but a public school only has a sports uniform. So we even got down to that
Wow, nitty
level.
gritty.
Now, I will say that he married within, I can't quote exactly, but maybe 12 months of our parting. He married and continued on having, family. So I never fought him for any dollars. He did agree to pay for our child's private health insurance, which was a result of him taking over part of my private health insurance. And he had a new family, so it was simply just adding my child to the private health insurance. So it wasn't until, some years later, he went to work away, and my child came to live with me full time uh, because he was working up north. And I actually took a turn for the worst health-wise and had to move to part-time work. And I had never qualified before for family tax benefit, any type of social security, because I was a high income earner. So moving to part-time work, some days 2 days a week in self-employment, I applied for family tax benefit. And I was quickly told I wasn't entitled to family tax benefit unless I had a financial arrangement in place with my child's father. And I wasn't prepared to have that conversation. I don't know how it happened, but Social Security sent him a letter and made a calculation that he had to pay me an amount monthly, and mm, I think it was around $500 to $700 a month. Well, when I received that letter, I waited for the phone call, and the phone call
Shit
came.
hit proverbial
And
fan.
yeah, well, it was like, you will bankrupt me if you expect this money. And I quickly explained to him, because I wanted to appease him and I didn't want to battle with him on any level. All I need is an agreement with you. I don't need this $500 to $700. I know that you have a new family. I know you have, obligations. Let's agree to $20 a month. And we agreed to $20 a month, and he would continue to pay the health insurance. And Amanda, I never received that $20. So,
Well, at least you agreed to it. I mean,
yeah.
that's the main thing, isn't it? That's
We
the thought
agreed to
that
it.
counts.
We agreed to it. I did get my family tax benefit, which certainly did help. I put my child through high school and university because I returned to work full time after my illness. I never qualified for any type of social security, and my child never qualified for any type of study or student benefit. It wasn't until he was 22 and living at home that he actually qualified for any type of independent. And at 22, he had 6 months left of his
Wow.
degree. So he completed his degree. We had a small amount of financial support, which I'm grateful for. It gave him some independence. So away from me having to support him financially. I don't know what arrangements he had with his father. I never asked. I don't know whether in his adulthood, 16, 17, 18, right through to 22, how or what his father contributed. So I can't
Yep.
comment on that. But I certainly have raised a very good
Beautiful.
citizen. He's working full time. He's finished his degree. He's a lovely partner. She's working full time. They contribute to society.
How old's your
So
son now?
he's 26 now. And look, his father contributed to that too. I mean, he was there. He was there for 50% of his child rearing years until he was 16. So I certainly don't want to dismiss him. He was a much more rigid parent than I was. So that may have definitely contributed to the way our son manages his life today.
Now, for women who I suppose are earlier in the relationship, or they could be as far into it as you, and the thought
Mm,
of co-parenting and still being in touch with that person long term um, must be quite daunting. Oh, you've obviously chosen all along to take the path of least resistance. Would you do that again in a heartbeat? That was best for you?
absolutely, absolutely. I put my child first, and I did not want, I knew any pressure that I may have placed on his father could have ricocheted back onto my child. So I decided to add any more pressure. Um, yeah, so that was my choice. I know that some women aren't able to do that. What would my advice be to them? Certainly keep an income if you can, and I know that's not possible if you're for all situations, particularly if you're the primary caregiver for children. But certainly keeping my income, studying, um, being promoted, it provided for my financial future today at age 55. Had I not been able to work and not build a war chest, I'm not sure where I would be today in my retirement planning and security.
And I know the last couple of years, I mean, your health has been up and down for many years. You've had lots of bumps in the road, and
Yeah,
you've had the ability now to take that time out, look after yourself,
yes,
become physically, mentally stronger.
yes,
I haven't seen you round the
absolutely.
traps for a couple of years at work, so and look, you are looking amazing, and
Thank
you're
you.
sounding stronger personally as
Mm.
well.
It's been nearly, gosh, 2.5, maybe 3 years since I worked. One thing I always did was keep my insurance in place, my income protection, my total and permanent disability, and that has paid off in the long run. I was successful in claiming on my income protection, and as a single mother or a single woman living alone, not having anybody else to support her financially, that has been, a godsend.
Yeah.
Um, when it came to total and permanent disability, I actually did qualify for total and permanent disability, uh, and that was paid out. I had two policies, and that changed my life. It gave me the ability to pay out my home and provide me security there, and to boost my superannuation whilst I take this time out not working. As I said, I was a high income earner. Um, Whether I do or don't return to work, I'm hoping that sometime in the future, with some re-education, maybe something that my body. I suffer from a very acute autoimmune disease, and I take a lot of medication that suppresses my immune system and causes a lot of stress on my body. It would be nice to think that I could contribute again, maybe working part time, but slowly as we go. I'm just at a point now where, for the first 2 years, I really didn't move off the couch.
Wow.
I'm at the point now where I'm rebuilding, and
Yeah.
that has twists and turns.
Yeah, of course. Ups and
So
downs.
for women, in the situation where they find themselves financially controlled or financially abused, make a plan. Look at what you can do to earn your own money. Have a war chest. I believe that we should all have an amount of money tucked away. In case we need to leave a relationship in a hurry. Don't rush relationships. Look at actions, not words. And I know that now as a 55-year-old woman, at a 27-year-old woman in love and lust and all of those things. um, you know, I didn't listen. I didn't watch the actions. I listened to a lot of love talk and romance, but
Is this the don't buy the bullshit speech?
yes, trust your see exactly trust your gut. you
Well, I
know?
think we do so little of that. We push our intuition to the side, and
Mm,
there's these red flags that pop up, and we think, "Oh, maybe I'm overreacting. Oh, he wouldn't mean it that way." And
yes,
when you're there at work being pressured to come down
yes.
to a dealership and buy something, do you wish you'd made different decisions or been firmer back then, or
I don't think I was capable of it, Amanda. I think that my confidence had been eroded, and I
yep,
think I would do anything at that point to keep peace. And to keep the peace, if it meant that I had to go into debt, that was all part of the relationship and the financial abuse. One last thing I will say, and I wish somebody had said this to me, ask for help. I was so embarrassed that I had allowed this to happen that and when I did break up with my partner, everybody said, "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us you were being abused? Why didn't you tell us you were being put under financial stress?" And I can't answer that other than to say pride. As I said earlier on, smart woman, foolish choices, and and love for wanting to have that family unit.
yeah, that beautiful dream of the
The
perfect family.
dream,
So
exactly.
you said all along, obviously, you stayed in touch with your parents and you were quite close, whereas many women become isolated from both friends and family
Yes.
through these relationships.
Hmm.
You didn't even let your parents know what was happening?
Not at all. No. They had their suspicions because he had displayed some antisocial behaviour at times when they visited. They could feel the strain, but given that they had been married, since they were 20,
Yeah.
they really weren't equipped to identify, what is happening here. Their modelling that they provided to me, I was trying to emulate, and yeah,
With
so
someone who
no.
wasn't participating.
Exactly, and I hid a lot. I hid a lot, and I acted a lot, and I protected, my son and everybody around me. I felt so embarrassed that I just couldn't admit to myself or to others that this is what was happening.
So if somebody's brave enough to face a girlfriend and say, "Look, I've seen some signs, you look stressed, I notice he didn't come to see you," if they're picking up on things themselves, I know there's some really amazing empaths and pretty intuitive
Mm,
ladies out there. So if they approach a girlfriend and say, "Look, I don't like the signs I'm seeing, can you put me out of my misery? Can you tell me I'm wrong, or
mm.
do you want to talk about it?" Do you wish someone had said that? Do you think the floodgates would have opened, or do you still think you would have kept up that act of "I'm fine, everything's fine"?
I would have kept up the act, Amanda, 100%. I feared the situation so much and I contained the situation so much that I would not have trusted anybody to maintain, or contain what might have been a really volatile and dangerous situation. So,
Which,
no.
I mean, most people don't want to make a dangerous situation worse. When people's lives and physical well-being is on the line, the
Mm.
last thing anybody wants to do is inflame something. So for people who really want to help and can see the signs, do you think just letting the person suffering know that you're there for them if they ever want to open up is helpful?
I think that's the best way to go about it. It can backfire, if you offer somebody help. I mean, I've offered other people help, and they've actually turned against me,
Yep,
and so they have to be ready. And Amanda, I had to be ready.
yep.
I had to be ready to make that break, and I chose to do that alone. I chose to do that without support. For fear of, I didn't want anybody else involved. I was embarrassed. I didn't want anybody else hurt. In fact, the only person that I reached out to was his mother. And I know that she had been through some similar um, uh, challenges in her marriage. And I reached out to her and she said, "Look, let's just keep this between you and I." And because I said to her, "Look, he needs help. We need help here. And I had begged him, as I said earlier, to go for some type of, counselling with me. And I remember the day I was at work and he called me to say that his mother had let him know, sorry, that I had confided in her. And he was so angry and so embarrassed. And I think that was the beginning of the end for his love for me. So, yeah, unfortunately, that didn't go well.
Yeah, it's
So,
very, like you said, it's a minefield for people to tread, who, especially when, we've got this, some of us are chronic fixers
mm,
and want to help.
yep,
So you're saying just tread carefully,
very
let someone know
carefully.
you're there for them, but be prepared for,
You could be
that I
cut out, you could be
yep,
pushed away, the spouse, could come after you. So you have to be very careful. I think sharing experiences is probably the best way to go about it. Telling your own stories,
I think
um,
anecdotes of storytelling are
anecdotes,
really powerful.
exactly.
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
may help the other person open up because none of us have perfect relationships, none of us have perfect lives. So, sharing some life experience, having empathy, identifying with the person that is in in a financially or domestically abusive relationship, even in the smallest way, may trigger them to be able to open up.
Beautiful.
So I'm certainly no expert, but yeah,
Well, you
I have
shared your
been there.
story with us very generously, Caroline, and I'd like to say, 1,000 thank yous for that. And hopefully,
More
look,
than
if there's some
welcome.
other women who've got some nuggets or ideas out
Yes,
of that, then, thank you for sharing your
no
journey.
worries,
Really
Amanda.
appreciate it.
All right, I wish you well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Bye.
Amanda. Bye.
And that was another episode of Financial Secrets Revealed. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you got some nuggets of wisdom out of that guest and enjoyed listening to their story. If you'd like to know more, please reach out to me. My contact details are in the show notes, or hunt down your favourite bookstore to find Financial Secrets Revealed and learn more for yourself. I look forward to hearing from you.